Welcome back to Soul and Soil. I'm Sylvain, and today I'm thinking about this question of whether humans can actually have a positive impact on the Earth, whether we can leave it a better place than we found it, rather than worse. Now, you've probably heard people saying that, oh, humans are a plague, we're a virus, we're a cancer on this Earth, and all the other life living upon it would be better off if we just disappeared and went extinct. But I don't think it really does anyone any good to kind of languish in that cynicism and that defeatism. So we do our best to move forward. This is kind of documenting my journey of doing that, and hopefully I can help other people in doing so. So I think to get the ball rolling, we really want to ask what it means to disturb or damage an ecosystem. What does it mean to harm the Earth? See, this is actually pretty complex when you get into it, because ecosystems naturally involve and even require a certain amount of disturbance and even damage in order to thrive and evolve, and for all of the different dynamic interacting beings to navigate existing in that physical space together. As a few examples, forest ecosystems, at least many of those here in the boreal, require fire in order to be healthy. Certain pine species, for instance, their pine cones will not split open and release the seeds until they've been burned. Another example of this is prairie ecosystems, in which large bovine mammals, such as bison, are required to trample the soil and leave their droppings and urine on the ground, and this fertilizes and kind of tills the soil, and is a large part of what makes them such abundant and fertile ecosystems. And there are many, many other examples of this as well. But suffice to say that damage and disruption are not inherently negative parts of an ecological process. And so every little bit of harm perpetrated by humans should not necessarily be seen as a negative thing. The issue is that it's a matter of degree, because, for the entirety of our existence, the past 300,000 years, there have really not been that many humans on Earth. There have been anywhere from a few million up to a billion. Around the year 1900, we hit 2 billion people, and it's only in the last century that we've skyrocketed right up to 8 billion people. So, the Earth has never experienced a proliferation of an intelligent ape species like us before. This is entirely unprecedented. And we have never had to come up with ways of really living in harmony with the Earth, because there just haven't been enough of us to make a really significant negative difference. And this isn't to say that past societies haven't lived to some extent in harmony with the natural environment, because they certainly have. But you get what I'm saying. Just being a living creature on this Earth, you're going to just by walking on the ground, you're going to create some amount of damage. And although damage and disruption are to a certain extent natural and morally neutral, it does take a certain amount of time for Earth ecosystems to regain their natural homeostasis. That's the balance that they return to after disruption. And the problem is that human activity has reached such a scale and such a pace that Earth ecosystems can no longer recover quickly enough to keep up with the damage that we're inflicting. When I was growing up, we would spend our summer vacations, my family and I, canoe camping in the backcountry of Canada, where I live. And when you're camping in wilderness parks, there are a few sayings which basically boil down to leave your campsite better than you found it, or leave it the way that you found it, or leave no trace. Now, I always really appreciated those ethics, and over the years, as my passion for environmentalism has grown and evolved, I've often thought about how those principles relate to our lives in general here as humans on the earth. And I really believe that we can not only have a neutral impact on the earth, but a positive one as well. It will require some major cultural shifts, however, and it will require a change in political will, which we're not really seeing right now, and that is going to have to come as a result of mass cultural change. But we're nowhere near making that happen right now. The majority of people just don't care enough. In order for us to move meaningfully towards a world where we have a more regenerative relationship with the natural environment and where we live in a more humanitarian and equitable way in regards to each other, one of the most important things that we can develop is a clear, compelling, and shared vision of the kind of future that we'd like to see, that something that really ignites our passions, and a world that we'd be really excited to live in, where everybody's needs are met, where we are not ruining the environment that we live in, where people are empowered to pursue their higher desires and needs as human beings, and where we do, in every sense of the word, live in harmony with the world that we inhabit. Now, I intend to go into a lot more depth in a future video about this ideal vision and the power that it has as a tool to help us get there. A great example of this is the aesthetic vision of solar punk, wherein we imagine an abundant, thriving, deeply interconnected world where our needs are met, where all of our energy is produced by renewables, and we live in beautiful, really nourishing homes and communities that bring out the best in us as human beings. Now, I personally suspect that we could make a huge difference by marrying the beautiful aesthetic vision of solar punk with the very practical guide that permaculture gives us, and I'm going to talk in way more detail about this in future videos, and get enough people on board and excited about these ideas and the possibility that it presents us. And I think that we could really start this ball rolling towards a world that would just be an incredible place to live in. Now, there are a whole lot of different changes that we need to make at all different levels of society in order to move towards a more beautiful, sustainable, and equitable world. And this project is really about empowering individuals and communities to take action in building a better world. Because there is so much that's out of our power. So going forward, we will mostly be focusing on the community and individual levels. But for the sake of this list, I'm just going to give you a few examples of changes that can be made at each level. So we're going to start with government. Now, a few examples of changes that should be made at the level of our national and regional governments are the strict regulation of industry. We need increased funding for research, for conservation and restoration projects, as well as for environmental education and education in general, let's be real. We need the subsidization of clean renewable energy, not oil and gas. We need the incentivization of the building of energy-efficient homes, and consumer rebates for things like electric bikes and solar panels are very helpful in empowering people to make these changes on individual levels as well. Then for some examples of community actions that should be prioritized, we want to be investing in public transit and bike lanes. We want to be creating community gardens. We need to be creating mutual aid networks and unions for tenants and workers. And we need to be hosting community workshops to help educate people and to facilitate socially and environmentally beneficial projects. And then we get to the level of individual action. We as individuals can do things like driving and flying less, consuming less meat or none at all. And I know this is one of those things that people hate to hear me say, but it is actually one of the best ways that you can make a difference. Try reducing your consumption of plastic as much as possible, in packaging and in all other ways. Avoid disposable fast fashion, and repair things whenever you can rather than throwing them out and buying new things. Be mindful about your water use. Hang dry your clothes. If it's accessible to you, and it won't be to everybody, invest in solar panels and in rainwater harvesting systems. Get involved in community. Make friends. Be informed and write or phone your elected representatives about important issues. And finally, and I won't recommend that most people do this, it's such a personal thing, but the biggest way that you as an individual can reduce your negative impact on the earth is to not have kids. Like I said, that one's not going to be for everybody. Now, you may have noticed that on those lists there were a number of things which kind of fell more under the category of social justice rather than environmentalism. And that brings us to something which was a big lesson for me, which is that you really cannot have earth care and environmental justice without people care and social justice. They are so completely intertwined, just as we are with the earth. And it was a little bit difficult for me to take in this idea because growing up I loved nature, I loved the earth, and I couldn't say the same about people. Never really liked humans much. And I mean, to a certain extent I still kind of feel that way, but I do like some people. And at the end of the day, if people's needs are not met as individuals, as communities, as societies, they are going to be entirely consumed with meeting those needs. They are not going to be thinking about the natural environment and environmental justice. So if we want the earth to do well, we need people to do well. And the opposite is true as well. People cannot do well unless the earth is doing well. We are completely interdependent. And I want to repeat my point that if we are going to take action and make this ideal vision a reality, to whatever extent we're able to do that, we need to focus on what is in our power. If we're constantly focusing on what the government is and isn't doing, which we do need to do to a certain extent, we need to be pressuring our government to do better, our governments to do better. Ultimately, a lot of that is not in our power. A lot of what corporations do is not in our power. We need to be pressuring them to do better. We need to be boycotting them. We need to be voting with our dollars. But we need to be focusing on what is in our power. So going forward, on this channel, I'm not going to be talking a whole lot about government policy. I will a little bit here and there, but for the most part, I am going to be focusing on what we as individuals and in our communities can do to actually transition to a better world. I have a lot planned for this project, for Soul and Soil, and I'm excited to see where it takes me. This is in part documenting my own journey of learning how to live better on a planet of, well, not only impending, but current social and environmental collapse. How I can make a difference, how I can get involved and also live a better life for myself. And in learning to do this for myself, I want to help pass these lessons along to whoever might be watching my videos. And who knows, I might also be able to learn from you guys. So whatever you have to contribute in the comments is always appreciated, as long as it's kind. And like I said, I have a lot of plans for this project going forward. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail now because it's still all really taking shape. But I hope you'll join me for the ride. Like the video and subscribe to the channel if it suits you to do so. And I'm going to leave it there for now. So thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you next time.